This guide covers all the actions the Astrologian learns from level 51 to 100 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant, as well as how to combine them with other actions as necessary. In the final summary, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation, alongside 2-minute burst considerations. We also touch on the stat priorities of the Astrologian. I will assume you already know the basics of Astrologian at level 50, and if not, you can view my Astrologian starter guide to get caught up. I will also assume you're acquainted with common abbreviations and concepts such as GCD, OGCD, weaving, and slide casting, and refer to the shorts and videos in the description on the subject if you need a refresher. Now then, at level 54, Malefic is permanently upgraded to Malefic 2, increasing its potency slightly. This changes nothing for your rotation. At level 58, you learn the ability Collective Unconscious, which, when cast, immediately applies a short 10% damage reduction effect to all party members within 30 yalms, and then applies a hot to party members within 8 yalms. Assuming no other action is taken, a Dome Shield is channeled which, every 3 seconds, reapplies both effects to all party members within the shield. Collective Unconscious can be channeled for up to 18 seconds. The instant effect of the ability allows you to quickly weave it for the damage reduction for an incoming raid-wide attack, or even just to apply a hot to those in the immediate vicinity. The channeled component is mostly helpful when there are no attackable targets and there is an incoming raid-wide attack. Do use this ability regularly and don't sit on it to wait for the perfect time to use the channel, as the cooldown is surprisingly short. At level 60, you learn the ability Celestial Opposition, which is effectively an ability version of Aspected Helios. The hot from Celestial Opposition stacks with all your other hots, and the easy access and potency of the ability makes it a very strong option on large dungeon pulls to help heal just the tank should you need it. In fact, relying on Collective Unconscious, Celestial Opposition, and Essential Dignity, as well as your defensive cards, can at times make Aspected Benefic feel outright unneeded, giving you more time to attack. At level 62, you learn the ability Earthly Star, which, when used, marks a ridiculously large area. If reactivated within 10 seconds, it detonates, healing all party members in the area and dealing damage to all enemies in the area. If, instead, you leave it for 10 seconds, it primes, increasing its power by 1/3, signaled by the star in the center turning brighter. Reactivating the ability after this point, or letting the timer run out naturally after another 10 seconds, will cause the Earthly Star to detonate, healing allies and hurting enemies. As long as allies and enemies will be in the area for the primed version of Earthly Star, you should weave this on cooldown. For boss fights, you can conveniently place the Earthly Star before the fight even begins, so that it can prime earlier in the fight. While not particularly important given the enormous area, the outer edge of the area is signified by circling golden stars. To more easily place Earthly Star, go to Character Configuration and, under the Target section, toggle Limit Ring Movement to Targeting Range, and press Action twice to execute. This way, you can always place Earthly Star immediately within a feasible location by pressing the keybind twice. Take note that Earthly Star takes note of your buffs for damage increases when it explodes, so you can sometimes gain some extra value from manually detonating Earthly Star if it would automatically detonate after divination ends. Just make sure to let it prime first. At level 64, Malefic 2 is permanently upgraded to Malefic 3, which significantly increases its potency. However, this still changes nothing for your rotation. At level 68, the trait Hyper Light Speed permanently reduces the cooldown of light speed from 90 seconds to 60 seconds, giving you way more regular access to this cooldown. At level 70, you learn the ability Minor Arcana, and Astral Draw and Umbral Draw are expanded to also grant a Minor Arcana card when used. Astral Draw, the one you start with when entering a duty, grants you Lord of Crowns, which is a card that does damage in a large area around you, meaning, optimally, you would want to play this card while divination is active. Umbral Draw instead grants you Lady of Crowns, which is a card that heals in a large area around you, which means you should use this quite aggressively to heal your party when it makes sense. The way this changes your opener is that you will need to use Divination, then play your damage card, then play Lord of Crowns, and then draw your second set of cards to then play the other damage boosting card. At level 72, Malefic 3 and Combust 2 are permanently upgraded to Malefic 4 and Combust 3, significantly increasing the potencies of both. Notably, this means Gravity beats Combust 3 on 6 or more targets, but at that target count, there's an argument to be made that the more upfront damage of Gravity is simply preferable. At level 74, you learn the ability Celestial Intersection, which heals your target for a decent amount and applies a shield for twice the healing done. As the cooldown is equal to the duration, you can essentially apply this to the tank on cooldown for some free healing and shields whenever it is available. At level 76, you learn the ability Horoscope, which applies a buff to all party members for 10 seconds. When the ability is reactivated or the timer runs out, everyone affected is healed for a decent amount. If a target with the Horoscope buff is healed by Helios or Aspected Helios' upfront healing, the duration is increased to 30 seconds and the detonation potency is doubled. Depending on your needs, you can both use Horoscope as it is for some easy free OGCD healing, or you can go the extra step and use Aspected Helios to boost it further. You can also use Horoscope and Swift cast Aspected Helios before combat starts to begin with the trap already set. Whenever you need AoE healing, like with Celestial Opposition, it is worth considering Horoscope due to its relatively short cooldown and decent healing. It is also good for extra free tank healing on dungeon pulls, like most of your other AoE healing abilities are. At level 78, Essential Dignity is upgraded to be able to hold 2 charges. From this point on, I recommend using the first charge of Essential Dignity quite aggressively as before, but you can sit on the second charge for a bad situation if you so desire, as long as the cooldown is ticking. At level 80, you learn the ability Neutral Sect, which supercharges your healing spells, especially Aspected Benefic and Aspected Helios. First, it boosts the healing potency of your healing spells by 20%. Then, both Aspected Benefic and Aspected Helios are improved to additionally apply a large shield whenever they are cast. If you are ever in a situation where you need to cast a lot of spell healing specifically, then Neutral Sect can often be overwhelmingly powerful. However, if you're getting by with only healing abilities, then Neutral Sect does nothing. Don't forget about Neutral Sect, as its cooldown isn't too long. However, there's no point in using it if you aren't going to use any spell healing anyway. Assuming you won't need it elsewhere, in a dungeon pull situation, you can use it to set your tank up with stronger HOTS and an extra shield before they pull. At level 82, Malefic 4 and Gravity are permanently upgraded to Fall Malefic and Gravity 2, increasing their potencies. This means Gravity once again is equal to Combust on 5 targets. At level 85, the trait Enhanced Healing Magic boosts the potencies of all of your healing spells. This is probably going to be most clearly felt when using Aspected Benefic and Aspected Helios, as their HOTS are boosted just as much as the upfront healing. But aside from that, it doesn't have any impact on how you play. At level 86, you learn the ability Exaltation, which reduces the damage your target takes for a bit, and then, when the buff ends, it heals them for a large amount. The best way to use this ability is to use it right as the tank reaches their destination and starts to take large amounts of damage. The damage reduction helps alleviate some of the pressure, while the healing at the end is much more helpful when the tank has already taken some damage, of course. As the cooldown is relatively short, this should be available to use for every dungeon pull at least once. In a boss fight, it is most effective to deal with incoming tank busters. At level 88, Celestial Intersection is upgraded to hold 2 charges. An important detail to keep in mind about this is that Celestial Intersection's shield does not stack and will override itself, so make sure to either use both charges on different targets or to space them out so you don't waste anything. Optimally, I recommend using Celestial Intersection on the tank when they start pulling, and after that, simply use the ability if the tank can benefit from the healing and simultaneously don't already have a shield from this ability. In boss fights, keeping one charge to use to assist a tank with a tank buster can also be helpful. At level 90, you learn the spell Macrocosmos, which, when cast, immediately does slightly more damage than Gravity 2, and the same damage as Fall Malefic on one target, in a huge area around you, and then applies Macrocosmos to your party. While Macrocosmos lasts, the button is replaced with the ability Microcosmos. While Macrocosmos is active, it records 50% of all damage taken. When either Macrocosmos is activated or the duration on Macrocosmos expires, each member affected is healed for a decent amount plus 100% of the recorded damage that they took in particular. Notably, as the cooldown on Macrocosmos is extremely long, you should never use it just for the damage if you think you'll need it for anything else. If you anticipate large amounts of damage, using Macrocosmos preemptively can allow you to completely reverse basically half of the damage. This can, for example, be helpful to give your tank a huge heal in a large dungeon pull, or it can be useful to single-handedly deal with a large raid-wide attack. Just remember that the cooldown is really long. At level 92, Divination is upgraded to grant you the Divining buff for 30 seconds, allowing you to use the ability Oracle, which Divination turns into during this window. Oracle does quite a ridiculous amount of damage for an ability, and should be used during Divination, and preferably within other damage buffs if there are any. Simply weave this once all the card play stuff is finished up. At level 94, Swiftcast's cooldown is reduced to 40 seconds, and the damage of Fall Malefic, Macrocosmos and Combust 3 is increased. Notably, this means that Gravity is now better than Malefic on 3 or more targets instead of 2, and beats Combust on 6 or more targets again. At level 96, Aspected Helios permanently upgrades to Helios Conjunction, which increases the healing over time component slightly. This does not change how you use it. At level 98, Essential Dignity is upgraded to be able to hold 3 charges. I still recommend using the first charge of Essential Dignity quite aggressively so the cooldown starts, but both the second and third charge can be used more carefully as you prefer. At level 100, when Neutral Sect is used, it turns into Sun Sign and grants you 30 seconds of a buff called Sun Touched, which of course allows you to use Sun Sign. Sun Sign is an ability that reduces the damage taken of your raid by 10% for a bit. Given the large window of time where you can use this, you can both smash it immediately if you need the damage reduction to recover and you use Neutral Sect in a dangerous situation, or you can save Sun Sign until a bit later where the damage reduction is more helpful. For example, if you used Neutral Sect to prepare your tank before a pull, you can hold Sun Sign until the tank reaches their destination. To round off, let's first talk about an opener for boss fights, followed by more general healing tips and advice to make the most of your tools in dungeons and raids, and finally, briefly touch on stat priorities. Let's begin. Anywhere between 4 and 20 seconds before combat starts, place Earthly Star. Remember that you can't stop it once it's placed. If you intend to use a gem draft, use it 3 seconds before combat starts. Additionally, make sure to play your defensive cards on the tank before combat starts, as these are getting tossed real quick. And then, 1.5 seconds before pull, cast Fall Malefic, then cast Combust, then Fall Malefic and weave Lightspeed. Then cast Fall Malefic weaving Divination and the damage card on the appropriate target. Fall Malefic weaving Lord of Crowns and then Umbral Draw. Fall Malefic weaving the damage card on the appropriate target and then weaving Oracle. Then repeatedly cast Fall Malefic. Just before Divination and your gem draft, if you used one, is about to run out, reapply Combust. Replace Fall Malefic with Gravity on 3 or more targets, and replace Combust with Gravity on 6 or more targets. Make sure to place Earthly Star every minute and draw close to on cooldown, and whenever Divination comes up, you can play cards and other OGCDs in a similar fashion to the presented opener. Now, for the healing tips section. Let's start with dungeon pull advice. Before the pull starts, consider applying Celestial Intersection and Aspected Benefic to the tank. You can also use Swiftcast to apply Helios Conjunction as well. If you do, you can also prepare Horoscope before Helios Conjunction. If you're confident you won't need it later in the pull, you can even use Neutral Sect before applying Aspected Benefic and Helios to apply stronger HOTS and also get the Aspected Benefic shield on top. This also gives you Sun Sign to help the tank once they reach their destination. You can also play your defensive cards on the tank as they pull. If Arrow is among them, making sure to put it before most of these other effects to boost their healing is beneficial. Once you are in combat, start spreading Combust to the enemies as best you can. Be ready to use Celestial Intersection and Essential Dignity if necessary while the tank is pulling. You can also use Lightspeed to allow you to spam Gravity while the tank pulls. When the tank reaches their destination, put down Earthly Star as soon as possible and use Exaltation on the tank. Then, if available, use Divination and start playing your damage cards, while using Gravity. Also make sure to use Oracle once the cards have been played. Plan your healing cooldowns around the fact that Exaltation and Earthly Star, and possibly Horoscope, will give you a lot of surprise healing in the immediate future. But if you need more healing than this, both Celestial Opposition and Collective Unconscious offers ways to apply additional HUDs. Essential Dignity is also great to have on hand if you miscalculate the timing of your planned heals. You can also use Macrocosmos if things are really going poorly, but due to the preemptive nature of the spell, it may be difficult to predict when you need it, so it might be better to plan to use it for a specific pull and stick to that strategy and save other cooldowns accordingly. Due to their cooldowns, it might be beneficial to plan Macrocosmos for one pull and Neutral Sect for another, just as an example. When all else fails and you have to rely on healing spells, which is okay, you can make use of Sinistry and even Neutral Sect and Sunsign if it is available to really power up your healing to save the day, so don't forget about these either. Finally, if Divination is not available for a specific pull, you have much more freedom to play your defensive cards when it makes sense, rather than throwing them out there while the tank is pulling, as long as you draw on time. For raids and dungeon bosses, it is a lot more complicated, and the simplest answer is to make sure to use your toolkit efficiently to deal with each mechanic. Make sure to use Celestial Intersection to regularly heal one of the tanks almost completely freely. Exaltation can be used to assist a tank with a tank buster, and Macrocosmos can be planned in advance to deal with either a massive amount of tank damage or a massive amount of raid-wide damage. Both Macrocosmos, Horoscope, and Earthly Star have this trap-like property where they automatically detonate after a while, which you can use to your advantage if the moment where they are needed happens to be a time where you don't have the time to cast or weave them. Both Celestial Opposition and Collective Unconscious also serve as very easy ways to apply raid-wide healing without using GCDs. And while Essential Dignity has a tendency to have priority for tanks, it is a great tool to save someone when they make a mistake. However, in general, as raid bosses follow a set pattern, it is often beneficial to plan your cooldowns ahead of time on very hard fights, so you have enough cooldowns for each mechanic. This means that instead of saving things like Macrocosmos as a last resort, you plan it for a particularly difficult mechanic. Finally, regarding stat priorities, take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level as long as it has Mind on it. After that, Astrologian's stat priority is critical hit, then direct hit, then determination, and then spell speed. The reason that direct hit is prioritized slightly higher than determination is that while direct hit does not actually boost your healing output, and determination does, the fact that healers never find direct hit on their gear naturally means that melting direct hit materia will be better for increasing your damage output, and the healing bonus determination does grant is not enough to affect your actual approach to combat at all. You will almost certainly still cast the same amount of healing spells in most situations. Spell speed allows you to cast more spells and also boosts the damage of your damage and healing over time effect slightly. However, Astrologian's MP recovery is not particularly impressive, so choosing other options that equally boosts your damage output is often better. Although, a bit of speed may help you more easily fit an extra fall Malefic in before effects like Divination ends. Finally, Piety is a stat that increases healers' passive MP recovery in combat. However, it does not provide anything else. As such, you should only go for Piety if, after exhausting all your other options, you still find that you lack MP. If you are lacking MP despite using Lucid Dreaming on cooldown, Drawing on cooldown, and making the most of all of your other cooldowns, then getting more Piety tends to take priority over everything else. However, as this is a more subjective stat, you will ultimately have to make this decision for yourself. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Dawntrail, the card system for Astrologian was extremely random, where you drew a card and it could be any of the 6 cards. While the variety in effects have changed over the years, a key thing this style had in common is that the fortune teller style job, Astrologian, was possibly the one job that the most of all had to simply react to what happened to come up, expressing zero fortune telling ability. Ain't that kind of ironic?